We've all been sick, but not all of us would think to strap a live plucked chicken to our swollen nodes and cross our fingers that it makes us better. In ancient times, sometimes the cure was worse than the disease. Syphilis has been treated many different ways over the years, few of which worked. Left untreated or ineffectively treated, a person suffering from syphilis will develop ulcers, fever, and muscle pain. The ulcers turn to pox and sores all over the body, including in the throat and mouth. Eventually, their skin, bones, internal organs, nervous system, and cardiovascular system are irreversibly damaged.
The young emperor had gone mad with power and syphilis.
The 16th century Swiss physician Paracelsus recommended treating syphilis sores with a mercury ointment, his preferred method as he was worried drinking mercury would be poisonous. He also recommended inhaling mercury fumes, or better yet, ointment and fumes at the same time. Paracelsus clearly saw mercury as a cure but was aware of its risks, but patients had trouble following directions. Unfortunately, prolonged exposure to mercury causes poisoning and eventually death. As the 15th century warning went, a night with Venus and a lifetime with Mercury. Mercury-based remedies were in use as recently as the early 20th century, but penicillin, developed in the 1940s, proved to be a much more effective and much safer treatment for syphilis. Opium was used by the ancient Egyptians and Romans as a sleep aid. Roman Dr. Galen recommended an opium-based drink called Cretic wine to help with sleep, but the risk of opium was known even in ancient times. The Greek physician Dioscorides warned against overdosing. However, for Romans, suicide wasn't a sin, so some people suffering from old age or long illnesses chose opium as a pain-free way to end their lives. However, like most addictive drugs, the nature of opium makes it difficult to know when to lay off and stay alive, if that was even what you wanted in the first place. Opium was grown in Egypt on a large scale. Containers with opium residue have been found in Egyptian tombs, and even earlier, opium was cultivated in Mesopotamia. Historians have found artistic depictions of the poppy on engravings and statues, indicating its importance to the people at the time. In fact, the ancient Greek god of sleep, Hypnos, and the god of death, Thanatos, were often depicted wearing crowns of poppies.
I'm an alcoholic, opium addict.
But on the downside, opium treatments triggered severe depression, which led to dependence on the drug. Opium eventually led to the discoveries of the addictive drugs morphine and heroin. Opium use ultimately led to thousands of deaths and several wars. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas, he found Native Americans using tobacco to heal a number of ailments, including colds and fevers. Columbus took tobacco back to Europe, where some doctors considered it a panacea and called it the holy herb. However, the Franciscan monk André Tavay cautioned that tobacco caused fainting and frailty. Columbus observed people in Cuba both smoking tobacco and using it to ward off illnesses, and tobacco was also used by indigenous populations to whiten teeth, particularly when mixed with chalk or lime. Even in the 20th century, people used tobacco in various remedies, including to treat athlete's foot, and tobacco-based toothpaste continues to be sold commercially in India in the 21st century.
Tobacco.
Of course, everyone now knows that tobacco causes cancer and lung problems and has caused millions of deaths worldwide. Tobacco contains nicotine, which is an addictive substance. And while smoking tobacco is carcinogenic, there is scientific interest in studying the leaves for substances of therapeutic value. The ancient Egyptians used animal excrement to ward off evil spirits, for its health properties, and for contraception.
What's brown and sounds like a bell? Dung.
Although some animal dung contains antibiotic substances, it can also cause tetanus and other infections. Excrement in general has a tendency to spread disease. In the 1600s, Irish physician Robert Boyle treated cataracts by drying human excrement, crushing it to a powder, and blowing it into a patient's eyes. And there are reports of nosebleeds being treated with warmed pig excrement. Today, medical professionals use human excrement, but mainly for diagnostic purposes.
You get the satisfaction of knowing you're doing everything you can to protect the health of your colon. And I get another kind of satisfaction. So go ahead, unload in me.
That said, fecal transplants are used to treat recurrent colitis by restoring bacterial balance. This isn't an entirely new concept. In ancient China, sick people were given what was then called yellow soup, in which fecal matter from someone else would be made into a broth to treat diarrhea. Feces will cause nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, and fever due to bacteria, which includes E. coli and Salmonella. These are all normal bacteria to have in your intestine, but not in your mouth. Hepatitis A and E are also found in feces and can be passed along by kissing someone's dirty hand, for example. Bloodletting has been used as therapy for thousands of years. For the Greeks, it was meant to balance the body's humors. Hippocrates believed that the body was made up of 4 humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, and that a humor imbalance caused illness. Disease was treated by removing an excess of a particular humor, for instance, by bloodletting via leeches.
Drug companies don't want you to find out about leeches. You know why? Leeches are free. Yes, sir, I have great respect for the leech. I'm sure the feeling's mutual.
However, it was easy to draw more blood than was healthy without knowing it, and bloodletting could also invite infections. For example, in 1799, a physician was called to tend to George Washington, who was running a fever and having difficulty breathing. The physician, with the help of the caretaker of Mount Vernon, George Rawlins, let 3.75 liters of blood from Washington over the next several hours, in amounts of up to 18 ounces at a time.
I'm going to cut into his back, for I heard that it sometimes works.
In other words, more than half the blood in Washington's body was removed in an attempt to heal his illness. Washington died the next night of what was likely epiglottitis and shock. To put it bluntly, it's practically impossible to heal when the element that's meant to be giving you life is drained away in large quantities. There's a reason why when giving blood, the technician makes sure you won't pass out. Humans aren't meant to give up so much blood at once. Extreme blood loss leads to death. Coca leaves were used by the Incas as a panacea. The Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci wrote of the indigenous people using the plant in his memoirs. The Incas chewed coca leaves to cure sadness, hunger, and exhaustion. Though the Spanish colonizers didn't initially trust the plant, they eventually saw that it energized the slaves who were mining silver. Eventually, cocaine spread to Europe and the United States, where it was enjoyed as a tea and in chewing gum, as well as a surgical anesthetic. Viennese ophthalmologist Karl Koller first used cocaine as an anesthetic in 1884.
In the 1880s, it was a medical wonder drug. From headache to hysteria, 4 out of 5 barbers prefer cocaine.
Cocaine soon became a popular medicine in America and Europe. However, cocaine can lead to heart problems and strokes because it raises the body's blood pressure. Signs of cocaine abuse include depression, paranoia, and violent outbursts. It was eventually classified as a narcotic due to its high social abuse potential, and its medical use today is highly restricted. In ancient Greece, people believed that the womb was a separate entity that would move around the body when a woman went too long without sexual activity. It was thought that the womb had an inherent desire to produce children. Wandering womb was a supposed cause of hysteria, suffocation, and seizures, along with several other conditions.
There is something about sulfur.
Sulfur was the medicine of choice for women with wandering wombs. They were fumigated in sulfur and pitch resin, while lotions were massaged onto their thighs. The idea was that the womb would be so disturbed by bad odors that it would retreat to its natural position. However, inhaling sulfur can negatively impact the nose, throat, and eyes, and even swell the lungs, making it difficult to breathe. Sulfur is now used mainly as sulfuric acid in batteries and fertilizers. It's clearly not meant to be inhaled. And of course, wandering womb never existed, making sulfur's use as a cure completely pointless. Urine has been hyped as a therapy for thousands of years, particularly for viral and bacterial infections. Instructions for this therapy have been found in artifacts from ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, as well as in ancient Chinese documents and yogic texts from India.
Drink it, put it in my eyes, put it on my face, and just have some chai in the morning, you know.
Urine is usually contaminated once it's outside the body, but it's not necessarily toxic. However, drinking urine can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and fever. It can also dehydrate a person. A 2010 study in the Pan-African Medical Journal describes some Nigerians giving urine as treatment to babies and young children who suffer from convulsions. The paper says that the traditional therapy may be gaining popularity because of increased poverty. Due to the warm environment, contamination and increase of bacteria in the urine is a real concern, though the lack of available medical treatment is a greater one. And on the plus side, people using urine therapy showed great resistance to common antibiotics. For thousands of years, humans practice a crude form of surgery called trepanation, or cutting a hole in a person's skull by drilling, cutting, or scraping into the skin. Trepanation was likely used to treat pain in the skull or neurologic disorders.
Time was when a person's behavior deviated in any way from what society considered normal. The town barber would take a rusty drill, bore a hole in your head, and let the evil spirits out.
It was also thought that trepanation was a ritual practice, and it didn't always go well. The trepanations found in a Copper Age presumed family grave in Russia show that the holes were made at the obilium, a point towards the top and back of the skull. This is a particularly dangerous place to cut because it's located just above where the blood from the brain pauses before moving into the outflowing veins. Working here would have risked massive hemorrhage, yet people did it and survived. Or some did. Others didn't last long. Trepanation was practiced until the 19th century. Consuming bits of dead people has been medicine for thousands of years. Blood, bones, and fat have all been used to treat ailments. However, despite Charles II drinking pieces of human skull and alcohol, he died anyway. His doctors bled him severely after seizures, then gave him enemas and medicinal drafts. On the third day of treatment, the king was force-fed the alcohol and crushed skull concoction but died days later. His exact illness at his death is unknown. Blood was thought to maintain vitality even after death, so it was used as medicine as quickly and as freshly as possible, though this was difficult. The poor, who couldn't afford anything from an apothecary, would attend executions in order to buy a cup of blood, fresh from the still-warm body. Blood, however, causes vomiting when swallowed in large quantities. The digestive system isn't built to handle it. You can also develop heart and liver problems if your body absorbs too much iron from the blood you're drinking. Your body just can't get rid of it. From 1347 to 1352, the Black Death killed 1/3 of Europe's population.
Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!
The most successful cure for plague was quarantine and social distancing, which stopped the spread of the disease. But there were other so-called cures. One of these was the Vickery method, named after English doctor Thomas Vickery. A healthy chicken was plucked, then tied to the swollen nodes of the patient. When the chicken began getting sick, it was thought that the chicken was drawing out the plague. Occasionally, the chicken was removed so it could be washed. However, with this cure, eventually either the chicken, the patient, or both died. The plague ended in 1352 after quarantines were lengthened to 40 days. The sweating sickness swept across England during the first half of the 1500s. It disappeared soon after and still fascinates historians. Sweating sickness would appear suddenly, causing pain, sweat, fever, and dehydration, and hours or days later the patient would be dead.
Keep away, you fools! Your master has the sweating sickness.
An ambitious man named John Caius, who later called himself Johannes Caius, began to treat nobles because the disease seemed to strike them first. He advised them to sweat out the illness, drink herbal concoctions, and avoid going outside. This advice didn't necessarily help, since sweating was how the illness killed you. Extreme sweating and heat exhaustion could lead to heat stroke in the worst-case scenario and cramps in the best. Sweating is the body's attempt to cool itself down and is difficult to do in a sweltering sick room.
There are countless remedies for the sweat. Nearly all of them, in my opinion, medically useless.
Henry VIII was terrified of the sweating sickness throughout his life, and several of his counselors took ill. According to Renaissance studies and writing about the sweating sickness, Thomas More said, "One is safer on the battlefield than in the city."